After the fight, Mr. 3 with cracked glasses and Buggy with swollen lips finally calmed down, sitting on the soft sand and looking at the sea level in the distance. Speaking of which, Buggy, why haven't you seen Hawkeye since the meeting? Mr. 3 is naturally more concerned about Hawkeye's current highest combat power. After all, once the big event such as offering a bounty to the Navy is known to the world government, the base camp of Kalai Bali will definitely be taken care of by the Navy, and it is difficult to play a deterrent role without the Imperial-level combat power. It is said that I want to go back to the old place and bring some powerful combat power to protect Kalai Bali, and I will be able to return tomorrow at the latest. Maybe because of the swollen lips, Buggy's words sounded a little slurred. It turns out that it's really rare to be a loner like him. Mr. 3 sighed. When it comes to Hawkeye's old place and powerful combat power, all he can think of is the group of terrifying creatures with strong learning ability and superb swordsmanship. Just as he was talking, the sound of wheels rolling over the sea sand suddenly came from behind. Looking back, Ayasha, who was dressed in black, was walking slowly with a bicycle that looked ordinary. Just now, Mr. 3 asked her to fetch the sea bicycle that was in the warehouse at the base camp. Kalai Bali is not far from Breaksing Island, New Daughter Island, where Hancock is located. Mr. 3 intends to ride his bicycle there without wasting any time he can exercise. Although the training bonus attached to the sea bike is not much, it cannot be ignored. Ayasha stopped in front of Mr. 3 and Buggy and said seriously, "Brother 3, I pushed your bike over." "Ah." Mr. 3 answered and stood up from the ground with his hands on his knees, his hair on the top of his head catching fire. Whoosh. With the activation of the wax fruit ability, a gray-white candle channel was born from Mr. 3's feet, spreading all the way to the sea in front of him. "Then Buggy, I'll leave the rest to you. I'll go to Breaksing Island first." Mr. 3 took the sea bike from Ayasha, turned over and rode on it. Then he raised his hand and threw out a hard candle ball, landing on the empty rear wheel, twisting it into the shape of the back seat of the car. "Come on, Ayasha." He patted the back seat of the candle with moderate hardness. "Ah. Yes." Unlike the arrogant and glamorous Empress Hancock, Ayasha will definitely not mind sitting behind the third brother, or to be more precise, she will feel that it is quite an honor. This can be clearly verified from the girl's nervous excitement to the stiff boarding action. Whoosh whoosh. Feeling the constant shaking from the back of the bicycle, Mr. 3 frowned and looked back, only to see Ayasha tinkering with the candle back seat like a robot. Suddenly sitting sideways, suddenly sitting astride, suddenly standing up, suddenly squatting again, very busy. "What are you doing?" Mr. 3 has black lines all over his face. That third brother, I'm thinking about how to stay in the back seat to show my respect for you." Ayasha, who was standing upside down in the back seat, blinked, her blue eyes full of entanglements. Thanks to her wearing black shorts of different lengths, if it's a small skirt, then what? The corner of Mr. 3's mouth twitched, and he shouted with a headache, "The normal sitting posture is the greatest respect for me." Yes. With a bang, Ayasha changed her posture instantly, sitting on the back seat of the candle with a cute face. After dawdling for a while, under the pedaling of Mr. 3, the sea bicycle moved along the candle channel and drove on the rolling sea level. It was not until the figures of Mr. 3 and Ayasha drifted away and disappeared at the end of the horizon, Buggy took his eyes back, and a stern expression slowly appeared on the face of the clown makeup. Next, the Buggy pirates only need to recharge their batteries, wait for the news of the bounty navy to ferment and break out all over the world, and then take advantage of the chaos to loot and advance the city. According to the third child, this is waiting for work with leisure in the 36 strategies. But even so, as the captain of the Clown Buggy Pirates and the president of the Cross Guild, Buggy has his own business to do. That is, use this relatively comfortable time to thoroughly clean up the naval spies lurking in the pirates. In the evening when the sun was gradually falling, Mr. 3 and Ayasha successfully arrived at Breaksing Island under the guidance of the permanent pointer. After a wave of reinforcements obtained by recruiting Crocodile, Mr. 3's sea riding became more and more proficient, and the whole process was as stable as an old dog, and there were basically no serious bumps. Ding. At the end of this ride, physical fitness, tricolor domineering, etc. have been slightly improved, and the progress of black car refinement, 3%. The system prompt from the back of his mind made Mr. 3 stunned for a moment. The first time I dragged Hancock and rode to the 3-pillar roundabout, the distance was longer and the time was longer, and the progress of black car refining was only increased by 1%. And this time, it actually doubled? This progress, as expected, has a lot to do with my armed arrogance. Mr. 3 sighed in his heart, and at the same time, he couldn't help but have a curiosity. When the progress reaches 100%, when the sea bike becomes a black bike, what wonderful changes will happen? He didn't think the system deliberately gave this value, it was just a literal meaning. As soon as Mr. 3 and Ayasha landed on the island, several pretty girls dressed in cool clothes and holding snake bows immediately gathered around. They were all national protectors of the former daughter country, and now they are in charge of the outer security of Blakesing Island. Hello, Brother 3. The female soldiers greeted Mr. 3 warmly and earnestly. They naturally recognized this benefactor who rescued their country from the naval siege. Comrades. Cough, hello. Mr. 3 almost blurted out a strange name. His eyes swept over these few girls who didn't have much impression. Well, as expected of a well-trained female fighter, with her perfect figure and tight muscles, she can hardly pick out the slightest fault. Brother 3, aren't you in the base camp of Kalai Bali? Why did you come here suddenly? The leading female warrior glanced at Ayasha, who had never seen it before, and then looked at Mr. 3 and asked respectfully, Sir, Snake G is in a temporary attic built in the center of the island. Do you need me to take you there? Mr. 3 withdrew his lust, coughed, withdrew his appreciative gaze, waved his hand and said, No need, I'll walk over by myself, just in time to see the construction of Blakesing Island. Understood, then please feel free. Hearing the words, the female warrior squad leader gave up a path very cooperatively. When Master Snake G came back, he specially instructed that even if the core cadres of the buggy pirates came, they must follow the rules to the end. This was one of the agreements that had been negotiated with Buggy when the 9 Snakes pirates were recruited. But obviously, the 3 brothers who have great kindness to them and are recognized by Lord Snake G are not included in this list. Ah. Mr. 3 nodded lightly and walked towards the central area with Ayasha. After passing through a densely vegetated jungle, the field of vision immediately became extremely wide. In the spacious open space, the outline of the new town can be vaguely seen, and countless strong Amazon warriors are running back and forth carrying building materials such as wooden strips, sand and stones, building their own brand new homes. Although it has only been a few days since the evacuation from Daughter's Island, after all, it is the Amazon Lily Kingdom with per capita armed forces. Well, infrastructure madness belongs to yes. However, the temporary attic where Hancock and the officials of the 9 Snake Pirates lived was not located here, but on the highest hill in the entire Blakesing Island. According to Hancock's noble and arrogant temperament, the site selection is quite unexpected. So, Mr. 3 and Ayasha moved on. Half an hour later, they finally climbed the highest hill and met Hancock in the large ornately decorated attic hall. So, Mr. 3, you came here on your own accord just because you wanted to ask your concubine about tyrannical sex. Hancock put on a purple 9 snake cheongsam and a white cape again, and sat on the pink python with his knees crossed. His eyes were cold, showing the attitude of an empress. Who is in charge of guarding the island today? Openly disobeying the order of the concubine, even if you die 100 times, it is not a pity, she asked her sister Marie Groud, who was standing beside her. Elder sister, after all, Mr. 3 can be said to be the savior of the entire Amazon Lily. Marie Groud could understand the guard's approach and hesitated for a while. Don't blame them, they want to report to you, I stopped it. Mr. 3, who knew Hancock's temper well, took the initiative to explain. If you say that, you must have already prepared the punishment for breaking the agreement, right? Hancock's face was cold, and a strong coercion emanated from the depths of his eyes. The temperature of the entire attic hall dropped a lot in an instant and became icy cold. Haha, I'll talk about this after I'm done asking. As if ready, Mr. 3 smiled and said, Don't you really want to fight with me when you were in the 3-pillar roundabout? To be honest, this is exactly what I hoped for. After successfully recruiting Crocodile, his strength has been strengthened to a higher level. If he really wants to fight the Empress, it is not certain who will win or lose. Okay. There was a fleeting excitement on Hancock's beautiful face, and in the blink of an eye it returned to sternness. Since you have this kind of awareness, then the matter of trespassing here, the concubine will no longer ask. Tell me about your problem. Even if you can master the domineering in half a day, you are not a pure rookie who doesn't understand anything in front of the concubine. Looking at Mr. 3's sincere and humble eyes, the arrogant pirate empress could not help but feel a deep sense of pride and smugness in her heart. Mr. 3, who didn't know what Hancock was thinking, was stunned for a moment, and then he was not polite, and he asked the question directly to the soul. Hancock, will you be overbearing and domineering? Hancock. The nerves that had become happy with pride suddenly turned into embarrassment. This involves my blind spot of knowledge. I didn't expect you to even know the high-level usage of tyrannical arrogance. Tyrannical arrogance is one of the king's assets among millions of people. As the top manifestation of this power, the comprehension of tyrannical entanglement is even more extremely rare. Hancock quietly sat up straight, took a sip of the coffee in front of him, and said with a serious expression, "You have just awakened to the domineering look of the tyrant, and it is far from the time to come into contact with the tyrant, so let's practice with peace of mind." "Is that so?" Mr. 3 nodded thoughtfully, as if listening in. "That's right, that's it." Hancock breathed a sigh of relief, holding the coffee cup down slowly. "So, will you be tyrannical?" Click. The coffee cup suddenly cracked a few cracks, adding a bit of artistic beauty to its exquisitely crafted shape. Hancock's posture was so stiff in midair, staring at Mr. 3's eyes for a few seconds before he sighed heavily. Although the concubine has already touched the threshold, it will take a long time to master it. Recalling his continuous practice and insight in the past 2 years, Hancock's eyes showed a touch of helplessness. Hearing that Hancock, who has always been arrogant, made such a comment, Mr. 3 thought for a while, but couldn't help but continue to ask curiously. If someone wrapped a stick around the head and knocked it on the head, is it possible to awaken and comprehend this power?" Although this question basically has a clear answer, he still feels it is necessary to ask. After all, this is about whether to give priority to the development of domineering and domineering. Hancock's expression sank, and he rarely replied with a cold joke. "It is indeed possible, you can lie down and sleep now, maybe you will dream of it." Very positive and firm answer. Knew it, there is simply no way to do such a thing except openly and openly. Even with the system in his heart, Mr. 3 couldn't help but sigh in his heart. "Fortunately, I didn't choose to be a bully and domineering at that time, otherwise it would not be the last step. Strengthening this kind of magic skill of clearing soldiers is simply a big injustice." He focused on the analysis of the development direction at this stage, and did not notice Hancock, whose eyes were getting colder. "If there are no other problems, then let's go. On the back of Blakesing Island, there is a vacant basin." Hancock put down the cracked coffee cup in his hand and slowly stood up from the pink python. Only a muffled sound of pop was heard, and the coffee cups were shattered and scattered all over the place. Immediately after that, the monstrous aura of ferocity continued to emanate from Hancock. Sensing this momentum, Mr. 3's heart skipped a beat, put away many thoughts, raised his head and returned with the same sharp eyes. As long as Hancock doesn't use Sweet Gangfang, the magic trick for LSP, he is fearless. If you want to become stronger, the fastest and most effective way is undoubtedly to keep fighting against the strong. Last time, Leopard Goro's Rabbit Bowl Prison Lecture Hall not only upgraded the armed color and domineering, but also brought the additional improvement of the knowledge color and the overlord color, plus the gain effect of the Shanghai bicycle, which made both of them reach the breakthrough edge of double plus. Only a thin film remains. With just a little poke, it will break open. This is the real purpose of Mr. 3 going to Blakesing Island to find Teacher Boya to answer questions. He needs to improve his comprehensive ability as much as possible before going to the World Cake Island to find Teacher Katakori. "Come on, Hancock, I'll show you the horrors of the Candle Demon." Mr. 3 was full of confidence, and even arrogantly released harsh words. After half an hour, a handsome boy with a bruised nose and a swollen face was lying in a deep pit, staring blankly at the blue sky. Although Mr. 3's current comprehensive combat power barely reaches the level of the middle-level Shichibukai, the candle purgatory that is fully displayed can also play a very restrictive role in melee players like Hancock, in the case that the two sides do not understand each other. It's a pity that Hancock has seen candle purgatory several times with his own eyes. If this is still restrained, it can only be said that the title of Pirate Queen is too watery. As for Mr. 3's most destructive candle demon at this stage, the Great Flame Ring, it is obvious that it is impossible to use it on Hancock, unless he wants to destroy the Blakesing Island, which is still under construction. "Brother 3. Why don't you let me shoot? Even if I can't beat it, I'll beat that stinky woman of Sheji." Ayasha squatted beside Mr. 3, her cheeks bulged on both sides, and angrily put the black scabbard around her waist on the ground, as if she couldn't see her idol being bullied. "Ha ha ha, there is absolutely no need for you to fight Hancock," Mr. 3 advised. At the same time, I added a sentence in my heart, if it wasn't for domineering breakthroughs, who would want to be beaten up in a hurry? Ayasha muttered and unexpectedly did not answer, as if she was really angry. Okay, I'll give you my signature later, not just a scribbled 3, but my full name." "Really?" The glamorous girl's painting style suddenly changed, and her bright and moving eyes turned into shining star eyes. "Real. Amazing. Mr. 3 turned his head to the side, looked at Ayasha, who was smiling extremely happily, and shook his head helplessly. It's really hard to associate this cute idiot with the icy and fierce appearance of Yuji during the battle. After calming Ayasha's emotions, Mr. 3 closed his eyes with peace of mind. In the depths of his consciousness, he called out the system panel and began to check the attribute gain that he had traded for the pain of flesh and blood. The strongest Emperor subsystem, host, Mr. 3? Appearance, charm of personality, 77, physical fitness, A+. Lucky value, D+S. The clown buggy camp has its own buff, it will disappear when it leaves. Ability. Wax fruit, accuracy 100%, strength 100%, characteristics 82%, unawakened, armed domineering, tough plus, knowing domineering, tough, overlord domineering, normal. Props. Different dimension training manual, former Admiral Aokiji C-bike, 3% progress in turning into a black bike, Eternal Wax Museum, accommodated number, 1. Main quest. Omitted, side quest, same as above. The upgrades of both the knowledgeable and the overlord are within Mr. 3's expectations. After all, these two are already on the verge of breakthrough. On the contrary, the improvement in the accuracy of the fruit ability surprised him a little. Although there is only a 1% difference, 100% looks very obvious, much better than 99%. In this case, if the plan of advancing the city can be perfectly realized, and Ming Ge is successfully recruited to obtain a fruit ability development capsule, the three indicators of fruit awakening will be gathered together. Awakening of abilities, what kind of scene would that be? Even Mr. 3, who was calm, couldn't help but feel excited at this moment, full of anticipation. This stronger desire drove his tired body to lift his strength and open his eyes suddenly. Just as he was about to sit up from the ground, with a bang, he bumped into Ayasha's bright white forehead. Fuck. Ayasha, what plane are you doing? The head suddenly gave birth to a large package of Mr. 3's mouth, which became jagged and fragrant. Ayasha was knocked back and fell back. When she was about to fall to the ground, her slender waist twisted back with force, jumped away at a very fast speed, raised her hands to cover her forehead, which also grew large, and repeatedly bow in apology. I'm sorry. Brother 3, I'm really sorry. I saw you lying motionless on the ground with your eyes closed, just thinking, just wanting to sniff your breath. Co-authoring, you're afraid I'm going to burp, right? Mr. 3 rolled his eyes, it's 100 times better for you to ask directly than to come together. Ayasha lowered her head and murmured, but then, if you are resting, it will disturb you. Hearing this, Mr. 3 sighed heavily. Having said that, what else does he have to say? Forget it. I can't blame you entirely. Thank you very much for your forgiveness, Brother 3, about the full name signature. I'm in a bad mood, it's gone. Ah. How can this be? Whoosh. He said it was tough and resolute, but Mr. 3 still used the ability of the wax fruit to create a hard crayon in a boxy candle signature. He raised the pen, signed his name carefully and neatly on the candle board, then carefully covered it with the candle film, and handed it to Ayasha, who was tearful. Promise. Hey. Thank you, Brother 3. Super nice autograph. I will definitely put this in the most conspicuous place by the bed. Ayasha stretched out her hands and carefully took the signature, holding it in her huge chest. If you hang up the headboard, you don't need it, it's weird. Yes. Then I will sleep with this directly in my arms. You'd better hang it by the head of the bed. Mr. 3 does not intend to stay on Brixing Island for long. After resting for a while to recover some physical strength, and by the way, after correcting Ayasha's strange brain circuit, he returned to the attic hall and said goodbye to Hancock and the cadres of the 9 Snakes. Going around, when he rode a sea bike and carried Ayasha back to Kalai Bali, the sunset in the distance had completely fallen on the mountain, and the entire island was shrouded in a dark night. Although there are strict night patrols on the edge and outer areas of the island, there is no doubt that with Mr. 3's status, the whole process is naturally unobstructed and without resistance. Not only did he not get checked and questioned, but he even got a lot of rainbow farts. Mr. 3 did not lose himself in the sound of Brother 3, but was quite dissatisfied with this level of vigilance. The abilities of devil fruits in the pirate world are all kinds of strange. If there is someone who imitates the type of abilities like Mr. 2 Feng Kele in the hostile camp, aren't these so-called defense lines and guard patrols in vain? So, Mr. 3 viciously reprimanded the patrol's carelessness. In the end, what he got in return was a pile of heavy Baileys that the patrol captain forced over. What does this mean? The problem now is that your vigilance is too low. Is it because we became the 4 emperors and floated away? Make it clear to Lao Su, no matter who they are, they must verify their identity before letting them go. If this happens again next time, I will be blamed for being rude. It was not until they were reprimanded harshly that the patrol captain and the team members truly realized their mistakes and apologized again and again. Seeing this, Mr. 3 nodded in satisfaction, then raised Bailey in his hand and scolded. Also, don't do these little tricks, I'm not interested in money. One side reprimanded righteously, while the other side sealed Bailey with a candle block quite naturally, and handed it to Ayasha in the back seat of the car. Although he is not interested in money, after all, this is the intention of his younger brother. The patrol captain turned his head away from watching Brother 3's actions, and solemnly replied to the big tree next to him. Understood, remember the teachings of Brother 3. So far, the brief episode is over. After a night's rest, in the early morning of the next day, Mr. 3 called the veteran cadres such as Buggy and Alvida to start an internal meeting belonging to the former Buggy pirates. The content is fairly simple and easy, and that is, talk heartily. Of course, this is just a guise on the surface. The real purpose of Mr. 3 is to learn more about these veteran cadres, and then trigger the training manual in different dimensions to obtain permanent pointers to the corresponding training places. Then, fool them one by one and work for yourself. In the small conference room, the members of the original Buggy Pirates were sitting together. After some nonsense and mutual complaints, Mr. 3's understanding of Alvida and others finally reached the activation conditions for the Different Dimensional Cultivation Manual. Different Dimension Training Manual. A training manual carefully created for the core officers of the Buggy Pirates. After deeply understanding the past and ideals of the officers, you can obtain permanent pointers to the corresponding training places. Refer to the training of the members of the Straw Hat Pirates 2 years ago. Effect. After successful cultivation, cadres can obtain 30% of their cultivation results, including domineering, physical skills, spiritual power, etc. Characters that have been opened at present: Alvida, Cabbage, Mochi, Lion Niche. The permanent correction of the corresponding cultivation island can be extracted at any time. Huh? Carefully selected specific islands suitable for our cultivation to become stronger? Why does it feel so strange to say this from your mouth? Alvida was wearing a wild top that showed off her sexy upper body, with a mace on her shoulders as always. Smart and tactful, she sensed the obvious conspiracy in Mr. 3's words, even though she couldn't figure out what the problem was. The beast trainer Mochi, who was so fat next to him, showed a suspicious look in his eyes. Third, I admit that your temperament has indeed changed a lot recently, but this does not hide your sinister and cunning heart. The acrobat Kabaji also nodded firmly, took the words and said, 3, don't talk about such nonsense for our own good, just say it directly. What is your real conspiracy? Ooh. The Lion Niche followed and roared a few times, obviously not believing that Mr. 3 would be so considerate of his teammates. In comparison, it is more willing to believe that this pair of Mr. 3 must have some ulterior motives. My heart hurts so much, so that's how you treat me. The cautiousness and cunning of a few people was within Mr. 3's expectations, and he saw him clutching his chest and saying with a sad face, thanks, I have researched these islands with all my heart, and I just thought that in the coming era of great chaos, brothers and sisters, there will be a chance for me. The ability to protect yourself. I didn't expect you to think like this. His words did not provoke a few people to change their minds, but even more determined that this cliff is a conspiracy. Everyone has lived together, not died together, for such a long time, and it has long been clear who each other is. 3. I think you are right. The outside world is about to be in chaos. We really need to think about self-protection. Mochi made a contemplative look, very understanding. So, stay at ease on this island protected by several Shicibukai. Don't run around, it's the best protection for yourself. Mochi is right. Cabbage is also very self-aware. People like us are lucky enough to be able to get to this point. No matter how much we practice, it won't help. Instead, we may be attacked by other pirates. Lion Niche. Ooh. You must know that they are all cadres of the 4 emperors, now, and their heads are quite valuable. Although most people would definitely not dare to provoke a sea emperor, there would always be many lunatics who were terribly strong and had no scruples. In case of bad luck, you will definitely die. This gang of rotten players who are greedy for life and fear of death. Seeing that all these guys gave up on themselves, Mr. 3 sighed with a headache and winked at Buggy secretly. Seeing this, Buggy, who didn't speak much the whole time, rubbed his chin beard quite cooperatively, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said with a good sense of himself, Old Third, understand, after all, without my god Buggy, these guys will it's reasonable to be afraid of unfamiliar islands. In this way, you can take out all the permanent pointers of the prepared islands. My old father will work harder and accompany them on a trip. After that, Buggy split his white-gloved palm directly, floated to Mr. 3 and made a hook. Hey, Buggy, I can't pretend I didn't hear you. Whoosh. The waving mace swept in with strong wind pressure, isolating the white gloves from Mr. 3. Alvida took the lead, without the elegance of a sexy beauty, stepped on the conference table, stared at Buggy with an unhappy look. I don't have an ugly father like you. After that, she turned to look at Mr. 3, bring the permanent pointer here. Although the smile on Mr. 3's mouth was almost written, conspiracy succeeded, but compared to Buggy's mockery, what was it? Naturally, without hesitation, Mr. 3 took out the permanent pointer of the island suitable for Alrida's cultivation, and happily handed it over. A pleasant voice automatically came from the depths of my mind. Migrant workers +1. Seeing this, Cabbage, who was equally good-natured, or in other words, was equally embarrassed of Buggy's ridicule, gritted his teeth and stood up behind Alrida. Oh, I can't stand it. 3, if your so-called carefully selected island can't satisfy me, don't blame me for going back and tying you to a unicycle and doing acrobatics. Don't worry, you won't be disappointed. Mr. 3 took out the permanent pointer and handed it to Cabbage. Just kidding, things produced by the system don't need to worry about its reliability at all. At this moment, the worker gets +2. Ooh. The lion niche followed closely, with unpleasant eyes deep in his eyes, and his claws were firmly stuck out. As a lion, it also has its own bottom line. It can recognize everyone and even all lions as fathers, but only the most cowardly Captain Buggy in the whole group can't. This will shame its ancestors. Mr. 3 saw the decisiveness in the eyes of the niche beast, and while giving permanent corrections, he couldn't help but complain in his heart. Is it the captain of the Buggy Pirates? In a sense, Buggy is invincible. Hiring workers +3. You, the remaining ultimate bad player, animal trainer Mochi, although he was indifferent to Buggy's ridicule, but in the end he couldn't stand the eyes of the brothers around him, he silently stretched out his hand, and took over his own from the smiling Mr. 3. Permanent pointer. So far, all the workers listed in the different dimensional cultivation manual are in place. Not bad, that's a happy decision. Yurita, you go to your respective islands to cultivate and become stronger, while Buggy sits in Kalai Bali to stabilize the overall situation. The goal was achieved. Mr. 3 breathed a sigh of relief, clapped his hands and stood up from his seat. Wait, what about you 3? Buggy and the others noticed the loophole in Mr. 3's words and asked in unison. Under the suspicious eyes of everyone, Mr. 3 raised his hand and pushed the goggles lightly, and the depths of his eyes exuded a chill that was visible to the naked eye. I'm going to Cake Island. Auntie and Kaido were defeated in Wano Kingdom. There is no one kingdom where the 4 emperors are in charge. Now it's very suitable for extortion. The plain words that were clearly low and light, fell into the ears of Buggy and the others, but exploded like a thunderbolt from the blue sky, causing them to widen their eyes in shock. After being stunned for a long time, Buggy, the captain, was the first to come back to his senses. The smile on the clown's face seemed rather sinister just by looking at it. Galdino, you motherfucker, what a talent. Although the most terrifying ant in the world is now gone, the danger is greatly reduced, but after all, it still retains half of the fighting power of the 4 emperors. Even if you put aside the strongest Katakuri, there are also 3 powerful ministers such as Starcrackers and Owen. Coupled with the promotion of elite ministers and soul homies, in the current world, there are not many forces in the sea that dare to provoke lightly. Mr. 3 has never fought unsure battles, so this time he didn't dare to ask for a teacher on this trip to Cake Island, so he chose to bring Crocodile and Shirahige 2 Weevil as the strongest bodyguards to ensure that in the worst case under the circumstances, you can still retreat. These 2 people he decided after careful consideration. Of course, Crocodile does not need to say much, as the prestige and momentum of the veteran powerhouse in the pirate world is there. Whether it is a calm and careful thinking or a calm and indifferent personality, it is quite reliable no matter how you look at it. As for Weevil, the idiot, of course, it was because of his unparalleled strength. Just standing there, such a big guy can form a great force to deter the enemy. And more importantly, it can also use the time spent together at sea to let Ayasa quietly eliminate and transfer her maliciousness, speed up the progress of getting rid of Miss Bacon's constraints, and make it the strongest mercenary loyal to Baji Express. Of course, if Miss Bacon, a cautious and treacherous old woman, wants to send Weevil, it is definitely not feasible to directly ask Captain Buggy to issue an order, but it will make her alert. In this case, if you want to let the wife put on the condom, you need to use a little brain. So, Mr. 3 directly asked Buggy to hold a cadre meeting about stealing Cake Island. As chief of staff of the Cross, he led the meeting. Everyone, as I said just now, Wangguo, especially Cake Island, has an inestimable amount of money and treasures. Now that the 4 Emperor aunts have defeated Wano country, it's the best time to steal Cake Island. If it goes well, the treasure seized is definitely a terrifying amount. It seems to explain the feasibility of stealing the ant site, but every word of Mr. 3 never leaves money and treasure, these words that can affect Miss Bacon's nerves the most. After being recognized by the audience, he pushed on the lighted goggles and continued, considering the distribution of combat power between stealing Cake Island and Qiwuhai this time. After my discussion with Captain Buggy, it was decided that I, Galtino, Crocodile and Hancock would form a special team to secretly go to all countries to plunder the wealth, and all the profits will be used as the development funds of the Cross Union. As for the powerful Weevil, during the period of Hawkeye's return, together with Captain Buggy, guard the base camp of Qiwuhai. As soon as this proposal was made, it was immediately tacitly agreed by Crocodile and Hancock. The incident happened suddenly, although they didn't know what the real purpose of Mr. 3's actions was, and they were quite displeased with his arbitrarily arranging his behavior, that there were still outsiders in this meeting, so the two naturally wouldn't be self-motivated and sing the opposite on the spot. Hey, wouldn't this kind of arrangement be a bit inappropriate, my chief of general staff? Sure enough, Miss Jhin, who has always been mercenary, was not happy at that time. The reason why she agreed to accept Buggy's recruitment was that she could get enough benefits from staying in this pirate group with Hawkeye's back. How could it be possible to let others do something like looting the 4 emperors? All the profits obtained are used as the development funds of the Cross Trade Union. To put it nicely, God knows how much will be swallowed up by you. Oh, Miss Bacon, do you have any different ideas? Mr. 3 casually picked up the black tea in front of him and took a sip, secretly thinking that the fish had already taken the bait. Despite his doubts, but in the interest of the present, Miss Bacon still made a very contrary suggestion. My old man believes that as the captain of the 9 snakes, it is most suitable for Snake Princess to stay in Blakesing Island. My stupid son is brutal by nature, fierce in combat, and has rich experience in burning, killing, and looting, so he has better results in the past. Hearing this, Mr. 3 frowned slightly and pondered. The Cross Union has just been established, and you and Weevil don't have their own native troops. If you follow us to steal the Cake Island, the 4th team will be difficult to manage. The expression is sincere, the tone is tangled with kindness, the acting is vivid, and with the face that is naturally full of hypocrisy, it is completely. It looks like he wants to take advantage of himself. This hand is really to play hard to get to understand. Who said the old man was going to go together? Miss Bacon, who was sitting on Weevil's shoulders, retorted in a cold voice, raised his hand and patted Weevil's head. Just let this guy go with you. After realizing the development potential of the horror of the Cross Union, she will definitely not easily give up this great opportunity to buy people's hearts. If you can turn all the 4th squad into your own people, then the follow-up benefits will not be too huge. That's right, the short-term huge profits of Cake Island and the long-term interests of the Cross Union, Miss Jhin wants all of them. As for whether Weevil would be turned against by the so-called Whitebeard suicide note, Miss Bacon was quite confident. As early as a few days ago, she vaccinated Weevil, saying that Whitebeard had left nothing at all, except her personal mother. Don't believe what anyone says. Miss Bacon believes that as long as he resolves Weevil's thoughts about Whitebeard, he can keep him by his side forever and be invincible. And it is this insatiable greed and blind confidence in Weevil's weakness that will make her die without a burial in the near future. She wants the benefits of the Buggy Pirates, but what Mr. 3 wants is her life. It's not impossible, it's just. Mr. 3 had an embarrassed expression on his face, but he hesitated, as if he was thinking about what words to use to evade him. This tangled appearance directly dispelled Miss Jhin's last worries, snorted coldly, and asked, Mr. 3, don't you want to take advantage of the Cake Island? Mr. 3's forehead immediately oozes cold sweat from the candle, and said in a rage, Miss Bacon, now that we are a whole, how could I have such an idea? Ha ha. Miss Bacon jumped to the conference table, and the crutches in her hand hit the table with a loud bang. Since we are a whole, we naturally have to choose the most reasonable and fair action plan, and let Weevil replace the Snake Girl. This is the best plan. Weevil, who was sitting in the back, felt his mother's anger, and also stood up. The projection formed by the huge body immediately occupied the entire conference table, and even Mr. 3 in front was shrouded in it. Mom is right. Weevil roared, and the wind pressure swept through the entire conference room, causing the windows to shatter and the chandelier to burst. Such reckless behavior at the meeting naturally aroused dissatisfaction with the arrogant Crocodile and Hancock. The two stood up from their seats almost at the same time, their eyes dark and sharp. The whole scene was instantly filled with a tense atmosphere. Just when the two sides were about to start, the toolman Pakistani came out. The third one, since Miss Jhin said so, I think it's better to let Weevil follow you. Blakesing Island is a secret important stronghold for us, so I can rest assured that Hancock is guarding. Buggy's voice sounded calm, but if you look closely, you can find that this guy's body hidden under the Dahongpao has long been far away from the conference table, and only the exposed head and palms remain in their original positions. Crocodile, Hancock, and Weevil, who were as strong as monsters, really fought, and the consequences were quite serious. He had to make sure that he could escape the center of the battlefield as soon as possible before such a bad thing happened. Well, the Buggy pirates have been hammered from the heart. Number 1. Buggy, whose body parts retreated in advance, didn't even forget to turn his eyes to glance at Mr. 3 next to him, and muttered to himself. Hee, in the face of such a terrifying scene, 3 this guy who is greedy for life and fear of death is probably so frightened that he ran to the door of the conference room. What? He actually sat there motionless. Seeing Mr. 3 standing still amid the breath of the 3 monsters, the old Captain Buggy was so shocked that he forced his face to be expressionless. If the situation allowed, the eyes of this guy should pop out of their sockets. Mr. 3, who was in the center of the collision of the 3 people's breath, looked indifferent, raised his palm, and elegantly arranged his hair that was messed up by the hurricane. After a few seconds of silence, he sighed deeply and said, "Since you have said so, Captain Buggy, then I naturally have no reason to persist." As soon as these words came out, Miss Bacon's old wrinkled face showed a smug look, and he waved to Weevil behind him. Weevil understood, and immediately withdrew his violent breath. When Crocodile and Hancock saw this, he restrained his momentum and sat back in his seat. This stupid son of Weevil is too stupid. I need to explain some specific details to him, so I won't quarrel with you here anymore. President Buggy, just tell the old man when you set sail. Having said that, Miss jumped on Weevil's shoulder and left the conference room. After the two were gone completely, there would be no other outsiders and younger brothers in the conference room. With a gloomy face, Crocodile reached out his elemental arms, grabbed Mr. 3's collar with one hand, and grabbed Buggy's head floating in the air with the other, and dragged the two to his side. I just arranged lousy so clearly, I believe you must have explained it well enough, Mr. 3, Buggy. Buggy's entire head was restrained by the tight and cold quicksand, and he could clearly feel the anger and coldness emanating from Crocodile at this time. So, this guy turned the spearhead directly, and controlled the 2 palms suspended in the air to point to Mr. 3. Crocodile, this is the idea of the Chief of Staff. I told him at the beginning that this kind of thing should be told to you and Hancock in advance, but this bastard actually said that in order to make the meeting more real, to completely dispel Miss Bacon's doubts, I will talk to you later. Explain the real arrangement. This bastard Galtino is not human, he even counts the 2 of you. Buggy's expression is exaggerated, and his voice is full of emotion. In the matter of selling teammates, he has obviously cultivated to perfection. Fuck. You clown Buggy. Mr. 3 is also very wrong, never expected to be sold so thoroughly. Just as he was about to give this guy a set of beatings, Crocodile's icy, murderous voice entered his ears first. Explain, Mr. 3? Cough cough. Mr. 3 coughed lightly, although his collar was pinched by the quicksand, he was not in a hurry. As Crocodile said, since he counted Crocodile and Hancock in this meeting against Miss Bacon, he naturally prepared sufficient speeches. Crocodile, in your opinion, what kind of character is Katakuri of the Big Mom Pirates? Crocodile pondered for a while. Even if he was arrogant, he could not help but comment, strong strength, astonishing domineering, and seeing and hearing has cultivated to an advanced realm where a short-term future can be foreseen, claiming that he will never let his back touch ground, a perfect man. Then do you want to see with your own eyes how such a perfect man was beaten down? Mr. 3's eyes flickered, or to be more precise, coerce and lure a strong man like Katakuri to stand on our side, how? Although Katakuri did not have the Shicibukai recruiting list given by the system, Mr. 3 was not the kind of guy who would rely entirely on the system. Looking for Mr. Katakuri for further study, seeing, hearing, and domineering, there is a bit of a sense of ridicule. That's right. The reason why he wanted to steal the Cake Island after the defeat of the 4 emperors and before the city made a fuss, was because of the incomparably powerful combat power of Katakuri. If you can pull Katakuri, not to mention being recruited into the Buggy Pirates, In the case of Katakuri siblings and aunt, the possibility is very small. It is simply through some necessary means that he has to help the big one. Promoting the city is the biggest guarantee. Hearing this, Crocodile's mood obviously fluctuated briefly. Obviously, from Mr. Three's words, he heard this kind of foresight and planning. Thinking of the embarrassing scene of Katakuri's fiasco in his own territory, and recalling his aggrieved appearance at the Three Pillars roundabout, the corners of Crocodile's mouth twitched slightly. He smiled. Hee, although I am quite upset to cooperate with you, I have to admit, Mr. Three, your proposal is quite good. Crocodile let go of Buggy and Mr. Three, and agreed to go to Cake Island together. Rather than robbing the Four Emperors' territory, he was more willing to see the unruly Katakuri, like himself, being beaten without the slightest temper. I also hope that such a powerful man can stand on his side. That's fine, but... Crocodile changed the subject, deliberately seduce Miss Bacon to let Weevil walk with us. What is your plan? Hearing this, Hancock followed with his icy eyes. Miss Bacon doesn't know Mr. Three, or the current Mr. Three, but they are quite clear who have seen it with their own eyes. Judging from the domineering and heroic temperament that Mr. Three has now, it is unlikely that he will be interested in the so-called treasure. At least he will not break a cold sweat and panic because of a few words. Mr. Three did not hold back. He simply sorted out his thoughts and explained to the two of Ayasha's fruit ability and the ultimate goal of eliminating the hidden danger of Miss Bacon after permanently erasing Weevil's malice. It's really vicious, Mr. Three. After listening to the plan, Crocodile took a cigar and exhaled a smoke ring. But Miss Bacon is suspicious by nature. Do you really have the confidence to think she'd send Weevil out without doing anything? Hancock asked. Mr. Three looked calm and answered with a smile. We are just secretly eliminating the malicious intent of diverting Weevil, and we don't even need to tell him. No matter how detailed Miss Bacon's explanation is, what's the use? This mercenary old woman seems to value profit more than her own life. The slightly sharp and brisk tone revealed a frosty chill and murderous aura. The time is tight and the task is heavy. After a little preparation, Mr. Three set off with Crocodile, Ayasha, Weevil and a group of powerful younger brothers to the Cake Island of Nations. That is, not long after they left, the outgoing Hawkeye pulled a boat of fighting orangutans back to Kalai Bali. By the way, also brought today's latest newspaper. Its headline is quite explosive. Shock. The Admiral has been publicly offered a bounty. The organization that opened the reward list turned out to be. Just when the pirates, residents and even the Navy all over the world thought that the double Four Emperors had fallen, and the news of the new Four Emperors ascending would continue to dominate the headlines for a few days. Unexpectedly, the day after the news was published, the headlines were replaced by the Cross Union, that caused a sensation in the world. The newspaper clearly and detailed LY introduced the new Cross Union led by the new Four Emperors clown buggy pirates, officially openly offering bounties for the heads of naval generals to the world, and updated the first batch of dozens of naval bounty lists. For a time, the New World, which was already agitated by the stimulation of the old and new double Four Emperors, set off a stormy sea, and countless big pirates and giants of the dark world were ready to move. Most of the admirals whose bounty was placed on the bright side of a specific island quickly became the target of this gang of lunatics who would pay any price for the bounty. Even some naval branches have begun to be attacked, and the entire Navy is suddenly panicked. In the face of this big event, of serious gaffe, Admiral Akainu of the Navy made an important speech publicly, saying that he would absolutely protect any general who was offered a bounty, and expressed his will to the behavior of the Cross Trade Union, which provokes the majesty of the Navy. Take the toughest response. Soon, various branches of the Navy began to protect the generals who had been rewarded and launched special operations. The entire Navy was instructed by the world government to operate like a huge machine in response to the reward offered by the Crusaders. Undercurrents are surging, the situation is changing, and the forces of all parties have their own plans. The balance and order built by the world government gradually collapsed and developed in an irreversible direction. The era of great chaos has begun. Deep Sea Prison, advanced to the 6th floor of the city. Doflamingo, who was firmly bound by the big iron chain, stared at the newspaper in his hand dumbfounded. After being silent for nearly half an hour, he finally came back to his senses, crumpled the newspaper into a ball, and kept saying, Magellan, who made a puff, threw it away. Your motherfucker Magellan, do you really take Lao Tzu as an idiot? Before making this kind of fake newspaper to fool Lao Tzu, can you see for yourself what is printed on it? The Crusaders, offering a reward to the Navy, co-authoring your intelligence department is only capable of this, and fake newspapers according to Lao Tzu's words, right? Facing Doflamingo's almost furious roar, This time Magellan was no longer as silent as the previous few times. Doflamingo, don't doubt the authenticity of the newspaper, and, compared to our intelligence department, what I care more about now is your possible relationship with the clown buggy pirates. Magellan's eyes suddenly became sharp, and he slowly stood up from the ground. The purple liquid behind him squirmed and turned into 3 terrifying poisonous dragons looking down. Pure white pupils stared at Brother Doflamingo inside the railing. Even the arrogant Brother Ming couldn't help but feel terrified the moment he was locked by the purple poisonous dragon. He had seen how Magellan used his poison to make life worse than death for the criminals on the 6th floor. Now he is locked by Hai Lu Shi, and his body is weak, so he can't make such a joke casually. Hey, I have nothing to do with that bullshit clown buggy. During this time in prison, weren't you staring at me the whole time? The Magellans don't talk much. Rather than having a long conversation with criminals, he actually prefers questioning with violence. Poison Dragon. The whole world is in turmoil due to the fall of the Double Four Emperors and the emergence of the Crusaders. In this increasingly tense situation, more and more attention is focused on Kalai Bali, where the base camp of the Clown Buggy Pirates is located. At this time, Mr. 3, together with Crocodile, Ayasha, Weevil, and many of the carefully selected powerful younger brothers, have entered the Totland Kingdom, the territory of the Big Mom Pirates, which is commonly known as the 10,000 Kingdoms. During this special period of hearing the news of Big Mom's defeat, the entire world was extremely sensitive and cautious. Due to the terrifying strength of the crew of Mr. 3, the soldiers in charge of the escort work did not dare to neglect. They reported to each other, and finally got the permission of Katakuri. So, in the luxurious reception hall of Cake Island, the central island of Wangguo, Mr. 3 and the others saw a 3-star general with a paralyzed face and a huge figure. Charlotte Cracker, Mr. 3, Crocodile, and Weevil, I really didn't expect that the newspaper I just read, you squad leaders of the Crusaders, would appear here. What is the purpose of the Crusaders coming to the nations at such a time? The Cracker, or to be more precise, the Cracker hiding in the Biscuit Soldiers, with its legs crossed, sat opposite Mr. 3 and the others. Behind him, there are several kingdom ministers of different races, including Cream Minister Charlotte Opera, Cheese Minister Charlotte Monder, Mirror Fruit Ability Charlotte Brule, etc. All are strong warriors. Behind and on both sides of many ministers, rows of peculiar-looking senior Hormies stood neatly. There are bunny warriors in top hats, crocodiles with muscles, crooked neck trees with colorful candies. The appearance of these senior Hormies in the fairy tale style of the Big Mom Pirates made the reception hall, which should have been full of depressing and tense atmosphere, more grotesque and witty. From this luxurious lineup alone, it is not difficult to see that IWC attaches great importance to the sudden visit of Mr. 3 and others, and is even vaguely prepared for a big fight. As a pirate group that has been across the sea for decades, they know better than anyone what kind of disaster Wangguo will face at this critical juncture when the whereabouts of the backbone are unknown. The life and death enemies of the Big Mom Pirates, the bereaved dogs whose treasures and souls were plundered by Big Mom, and even the guys who usually do not violate the river water, are hiding in the dark and waiting for an opportunity. As long as the 10,000 kingdoms show a slight decline, they will definitely be attacked by a group, and they will be devoured completely. As for the former allies of the Big Mom Pirates, maybe they are also lurking in a corner of the surrounding at the moment, just waiting to pounce on the chaos and take a bite of meat. This is the real and cruel world of pirates. There are no absolute friends, only fundamental interests. It can be said that the current Wangguo is like a fat wild boar. As long as one hunter fires the first shot, the other hunters will pull the trigger without hesitation. And obviously, the arrival of the Crusaders, in the eyes of Kalija and others, is very likely to be the first hunter. However, this may be a rare opportunity for them. If the other party really comes with the purpose of plundering, then as long as they kill them on the Cake Island, they can form a great deterrent to the outside world. What if there is no ant? They still have the ability to kill any invaders. Of course, whether to drink tea and talk things harmoniously, or risk your life for a big fight, the specific choice depends on the cross-union. Mr. 3 folded his arms around his chest, and even though he was locked by the sharp eyes of countless strong men, he was still calm. Now he is no longer a rookie who was maddened in the face of the aura oppressed by the officials of the 9 Snake Pirates when he first passed through. Mr. 3's eyes swept across a group of ministers on the opposite side, but did not see the 2 top powerhouses, Katakuri and Owen. He directly ignored the question of the cricoid and turned his head to look at Crocodile standing beside him. Even Katakuri and Owen didn't show up. Crocodile, it seems we were underestimated. Although the ultimate goal is cooperation, their trip is destined to fight. Only the negotiation after convincing the opponent is the negotiation that Mr. 3 wants. Since teacher Katakuri wants to maintain a shy and mysterious sense, he is forced to come out and meet people. Wearing a coat and biting a cigar, a typical arrogant smile emerges from the corner of the old San's mouth. Then let them feel it well and underestimate our cost. Boom. Crocodile stepped out in one step, and the mini version of the enhanced Shalon in his hand rotated at a high speed. At the same time, Ayasha, who was standing on the other side of Mr. 3, poked the long knife around her waist, and the thick black mist beat with the cold light of the sharp blade. Behind Mr. 3, Weevil, who was entrusted by his mother, also raised the knife in his hand quite cooperatively. The mighty and domineering terrifying aura bloomed, colliding and confronting the aura of the ministers. Standing behind them is the Buggy Express powerful pirate with an average bounty of over million. Don't look at the images of these little brothers who are usually harmless to humans and animals, but when something happens, they are all desperados with fierce faces and fearless. Countless bladed cannons were raised high, and the momentum bloomed one after another, forming a good deterrent, suppressing the high-level Hormies who was about to move around. The two sides were at each other's throats, and when Crocodile was about to throw Sha Lan out of his hand, the biscuit soldier Cracker, who was sitting on the main seat, couldn't hold it anymore. Wait. Brother Katakuri is dealing with a few intruders on Chocolate Island and will be back soon. You guys, don't be impulsive, we have no malicious intentions. I saw the biscuit soldiers wave their hands again and put down their great swords and shields to show that they had no intention of starting a war. At the same time, the cracker body hidden inside couldn't help but scolded his father in his heart. If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have questioned these guys aloud in order to show their momentum. Brother Katakuri asked me to stabilize them first and try to figure out what to do. If the two sides start a war because of my words, then he will not be killed by him in the end. Cracker panicked. It's not that I'm afraid of the mere cross-union, but I'm worried that I will screw up the things that Brother Katakuri entrusted to me. Under his signal, many ministers and elite children in the rear put away their weapons and restrained their breath. Seeing that Mr. 3 and the others on the opposite side still had no plans to stop, the biscuit soldiers transformed by the crackers quickly clapped their hands and winked wildly at the corner of the reception hall. Hearing the sound of whoosh among the many high-level homits, a luxurious table with 4 table legs swaying rapidly rushed out, running all the way, and a sudden break stopped in front of Mr. 3. Immediately afterward, the tablecloth with 2 big eyes of Kazilan fluttered leisurely, and the 4 corners with gold rims rolled around. While covering the luxurious table, he handed the lean and clear teacup and tea set to Mr. 3, Crocodile, in front of Yasha and Weevil. A white teapot with 2 long legs followed, and elegantly poured steaming special tea into the teacup. Whoosh whoosh. There are also countless uniquely shaped fruit plates flying from all directions, containing pastries, cookies, fruit breads and other delicacies, falling on the table like raindrops, dazzling when you look around. At the same time, the various musical instruments Hormies gathered around and played a light and melodious music. This is an afternoon tea banquet for VIP guests at Cake Island. You can taste it first. Brother Katakuri will be here soon. As a sign of sincerity, the cracker came out of the biscuit soldiers directly, revealing its original true appearance. Although he desperately tried to squeeze out a friendly smile, that face, which was not a good person at first glance, always had an evil temperament. Seeing them make such a big concession, Mr. 3 and Crocodile are naturally not very good at continuing. The goal of their trip is to win over Katakuri as much as possible. In the case that the target does not appear, the situation is too stiff, and the follow-up is not very good. What's more, the deterrence they want is already in place, and the crackers show weakness and take the initiative to give up the opportunity to negotiate. This is a great success at this stage. The fierce conflict that should have erupted has ceased. Mr. 3 glanced at Weevil, who was staring at many desserts, and said softly, "Weevil, wipe your saliva and eat it if you want." "Is it really possible? Then I'm welcome." Silly Han Weevil just walked over, grabbed the bread and dessert and ate it in large gulps. The whole process was alive and well, and there were no bad symptoms of poisoning. Seeing this, Mr. 3 slowly picked up a piece of pink cream cake that he had been looking at for a long time. When I couldn't wait to put it in my mouth, I looked back at Ayasha again. Ayasha immediately understood what Brother 3 meant, and nodded lightly to confirm that the other party was not malicious. At this point, Mr. 3 has completely dispelled the other party's concerns about poisoning, opened his mouth and bit the pink cream cake in one bite. The moment the cake entered, his eyes widened in disbelief. The sweet but not greasy cream wraps the fluffy and fragrant bread and explodes in the mouth. The two complement each other and burst out with a delicious fragrance. While madly stimulating the taste buds, it brings a food shock that goes straight to the soul. As expected of the product of Cake Island, the taste of this cream cake. Absolutely. Oh, there's no hope, it's better than the little girl with the black long knife in the back. Crocodile sat in front of the luxurious dining table with Erlang's legs crossed, and his eyes turned, just to catch a glimpse of Mr. Three's happy and moist face, with deep disdain and contempt in his words. Even though the dessert and mellow tea in front of him are quite tempting, he would rather smoke a few more cigars than eat under the eyes of the enemy. That's too out of character. This is the biggest difference between him and Mr. Three. What Mr. Three pursues is to do whatever you want, not an idle package that has no practical effect. As for Ayasa, as Crocodile said, this guy stood in the same place with no expression on his face, his red lips were tightly closed, his will was firm, and he had no intention of eating at all, it seemed so on the surface. In fact, Ayasha, who loves sweets, had already filled her mouth with halaziot at this time. If it wasn't for forced lips, this meeting would have overflowed. But even so, she still just stood silently behind Mr. Three, pressing the knife with her hand, her blue eyes flashing with a vigilant look. During the period when Brother Three is dining, she must ensure that she has enough reaction time to deal with any possible sneak attacks and attacks on Brother Three. The short afternoon tea time is fleeting. In the end, Mr. Three was just a little bit curious, and wanted to try the desserts of this Cake Island. He didn't really want to eat and drink. They're here to fight someone. Mr. Three stood up and glanced at the many desserts on the table. I saw him pick up a multi-layered fruit-filled cream cake, turned around and handed it to Ayasha. Promise. Although he was tasting desserts, his arrogance was never interrupted. Originally, I was going to target many ministers headed by Kalija, but I didn't expect to catch the most, but the sound of gulu-gulu, swallowing continuously came from behind. Of course, if his perception were more detailed, he could find one of them, from Crocodile next to him. Looking at the cake that was handed to him with various special effects of food, Ayasha was stunned for a moment, then she stretched out her hands, respectfully took the plate from Mr. Three's hand, and stared at the cake with light. After doing this thoughtful act, Mr. Three didn't stop, turned his head to look at the gloomy-looking cracker across the luxurious dining table. Since Katakori hasn't come over yet, then let's settle the old account first. His tone was high-pitched and cold. Hearing this, Kalija frowned, and some couldn't believe his ears. He didn't remember what he had had with the big staff member of the Crusades. Even before the buggy pirates reached the top of the 4 emperors in the Cross Guild was announced, as the 3 desert generals, he didn't even look down on this broken candleman. What do you mean by that? There was a strong hostility in Kelika's narrowed eyes. Mr. Three was silent, only heard the sound of hum, and the 3-character hairstyle on his head ignited. Under the incredible gazes of Cracker and the ministers, he clapped his hands leisurely. Whoosh! The gray-white candle mass spewed out, turning into a huge candle soldier holding a giant sword and a round shield. What do you mean? Naturally, you imitated my ability this account. I imitate your ability. Cracker was stupid at the time. From the huge squinting eyes, you can see how shocked he is at this moment. The cookie soldier has always been the manifestation of his devil fruit abilities, and even the core is not an exaggeration at all. Following my mother in the New World for so many years, I also relied on the fame of the biscuit soldiers, and thus also won the title of Thousand Hand Cracker. And now, this unknown person who jumped out of nowhere, actually said that he imitated his ability. How can you bear this? Cracker's wide eyes squinted again, and an uncontrollable flow of anger emanated from the slits of his eyes. Who do you think Lao Su is? Lao Su is a 1,000-handed force rack. Sizzle. Cracker let out a roar, and the end of the purple triangular braid tied behind his head crackled, bursting into frantic beating sparks. In this way, it is more like echoing Mr. Three's so-called imitation. Mr. Three's 3-character hairstyle erected at this time is burning with flames. And it's not to imitate my ability. Look at the little sparks on your braids for yourself. It's clearly referring to the flaming flame at the top of Lao Su's hair. Mr. Three saw through the essence at a glance, and raised his hand to the spark of braided braids. Behind Cracker, the eyes of the ministers moved back and forth between the two. Comparing the two, it seems like Brother Kelijah's is really smaller than others? And how the candle soldier wearing the knight's helmet looks more powerful and domineering than the paralyzed biscuit soldier. Could it be that Brother Kalija really imitated the fruit ability developed by others? Except for a few ministers who grew up with Cracker, most of them began to look suspicious. Even so, they were all Cracker's younger siblings after all, so naturally they wouldn't talk too much in this situation. But Mr. 3 can't say for sure. Sisters Cracker, you don't have the size of a thumb, you are really shameless, copying our third brother's ability. Ha ha ha, you still have a thousand-handed cracker, how dare you? Just call it a plagiarized cracker. If you don't know how to develop the fruit ability, just say, let our third brother who is handsome and handsome, with extraordinary temperament, wisdom and strength teach you. What kind of hero is stealing? Even if the flame is small, it's still forked, and I can't understand the template for you. The younger brothers with a bounty of more than millions suddenly boiled, pointing to the little spark on the braid of the cracker and sneering. Some people even held chopsticks on their faces, imitating the appearance of the cracker, and said yin and yang, who do you think I am? I copied the cracker. Ah ha 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 ha. This kind of crosstalk caused a lot of laughter on the spot, and the younger brothers beat their chests and feet and clapped their stomachs. A cheerful atmosphere filled the entire waiting hall. You bloody bastards. Cracker gritted his teeth in anger, but he couldn't think of a rebuttal. His, indeed, was smaller than others, and it was forked. Exasperated, he simply gave up the verbal argument, his eyes were fierce, and he controlled the strong biscuit soldier to step out. Boom. The terrifying coercion exploded from the biscuit soldier's body, and the sky and the earth changed color in an instant, and the red and black impact went directly to the body and mind, sweeping the audience. This kind of imposing manner is the unique ability of Kalija, although it is not a domineering, but the shock of the two erupted against the soul, but it has the same effect. Even in the same camp, the senior Hormies in the hall was scared back again and again. The pirate brothers of the Cross Guild also stopped their laughter, cold sweat oozes from their foreheads, moved the catwalk subconsciously, and quietly hid behind the third brother. In terms of ridicule and abuse, they have absolute confidence to be invincible, but if they really want to confront a powerhouse of this level, it is absolutely impossible. Are you so eager to taste failure? Mr. 3 was naturally unafraid of the aura that was not even the color of an overlord, and the gray-white candles oozing out of his feet formed a field, which was connected to the candle soldiers standing in front. The opponent this time is Dessert 3 General Stars Cracker, not the weak chicken kernel of 3 Pillars Roundabout, so he must be serious. Stop talking nonsense, come on. I will use strength to prove who is the fake. The long-awaited Cracker roared and drove the biscuit soldiers to attack first. Whoosh. The giant shadow skipped over, and the huge and sturdy biscuit soldier was extremely fast, and appeared in front of the candle soldier in the blink of an eye. With a huge long sword in his hand, he slashed down violently with a sound of breaking the sky. A red light flashed in Mr. 3's eyes, seeing that his domineering has been elevated to the tough class, and he captured the attack trajectory of the biscuit soldiers. At the thought, the eyes of the candle soldier hidden under the helmet of the knight also flashed red light, and the left hand raised the candle-round shield rung beside him. This kind of frontal resistance fell in the eyes of Cracker, and it was simply a foolish behavior of a man's arm and a car. Hehe, a mere candle creation, delusional to block the slashing of the biscuit soldiers that can even cut through steel? How dare you say that Lao Su plagiarized, and see Lao Su split you even with your shield into 2 pieces? Boom. In the crazy and confident laughter of Cracker, the giant sword of the biscuit soldier slashed on the candle-round shield with an extremely domineering and tyrannical attitude. With the loud noise of the steel collision, the powerful breath storm exploded in all directions. In the corner of the hall, the 4 legs of the luxurious dining table were curled up and trembling. The big eyes of Kazlan on the gold-rimmed tablecloth were pale and dull, and the teapots and cups were even more deformed by Hormies. Fortunately, they have quick eyes and quick hands, and they slipped away before the 2 sides fought, otherwise, this collision would be enough to make them faint on the spot. How is this kind of touch possible? It's just a mere candle, but it has a hardness far exceeding that of steel. At the moment when the 2 sides collided, the confident and insolent smile on the corner of Cracker's mouth immediately solidified, and his eyes stared incredulously at the candle soldier who was standing still under the attack of the biscuit soldiers. He couldn't understand and couldn't imagine that there was actually a candle shield stronger than steel in the world. Candle is harder than steel, isn't that common sense? Mr. 3 smiled lightly. Next, it's his turn. The candle soldier withstood the attack, raised the huge candle sword and slashed at the biscuit soldier's neck. Whizzing. The square biscuit hanging in front of the biscuit soldier's chest moved quickly, successfully blocking the slash of the candle sword. This feeling, instead of letting out a sigh of relief, the Cracker who controlled the biscuit soldier to block the attack shrank his pupils. In the next second, The candle sword chopped on the biscuit cube melted like ice and snow, forming a fluid candle that crossed the biscuit cube and turned into several sharp candle spears, stabbing the biscuit soldier's huge head from all directions. Dang dang dang. Sparks flew, and the sound of sharp weapons colliding came out. 5 steel giant swords were born out of thin air, stopping the overwhelming candle pistols. I don't know where it started, but 4 slender arms holding big swords grew out of the back of the biscuit soldier. Interesting. Mr. 3, who was knocked down by the first shot, did not panic at all, and his footsteps moved slightly, causing more fluid candles to pour into the candle soldier's body. Whoosh whoosh. Behind the candle soldier, the gray and white candles wriggled, and 4 slender and tough candle arms also emerged. Unlike the biscuit soldier's immutable great sword, the candle soldier's new arms are holding a clawhammer, a square halberd, a giant mace and a double-edged battle axe. Asshole. Seeing that Mr. 3 used the same move as himself, Cracker scolded him angrily, and controlled the biscuit soldier to wave his 6 arms and launch an all-round fierce attack. The candle soldier did not retreat but advanced, and the eyes hidden in the candle helmet lit up with fighting intent, facing the fierce and ferocious offensive of the biscuit soldier. Originating from absolute confidence in the hardness of candle soldiers, Mr. 3 intends to go head-to-head with biscuit soldiers. Boom. Under the control of their respective abilities, the huge candle soldiers and the biscuit soldiers slammed into each other. Weapons and swords kept colliding, the round giant shield and square biscuits cut horizontally and vertically, and countless candle scraps and biscuit shards scattered in the violent confrontation, dyeing this spacious and open reception hall with a fantastic color intertwined with yellow and white. The attacks on both sides were swift and frantic. At this moment, they gave up skills, gave up body skills, gave up calculation. As if to prove that their abilities are the right way, both Mr. 3 and the Cracker tacitly did not use armament color domineering. The only thing left is the pure and extreme strength collision of 2 giant soldiers. Bang bang bang. As the attacking and defending speed of both sides became faster and stronger, even the solid ground began to be unable to withstand this high-intensity heavy pressure, breaking every inch, covered with spider marks. Such a brutal and tyrannical war of attrition attracted the attention of everyone in the audience. The ministers of Guo, who knew the strength of the Cracker cookie soldiers, were moved with expressions, but they never imagined that the seemingly fragile candle soldiers could actually do it to such an extent. On Mr. 3's side, Crocodile's face with deep cuts was also full of shock that could not be concealed, and he didn't even care about smoking the cigar in his mouth. In fact, this kind of boring battle did not make him show such an expression. What makes Crocodile really unbelievable is that Mr. 3 is so fast and even exaggerated. His candle soldiers couldn't achieve this level a few days ago. Silly Han Weevil scratched his head for no apparent reason. In his eyes as strong as a monster, the battle in front of him was ordinary and unremarkable. Ayasa, whose mouth was covered in milky white cream, stared at the candle soldier with glowing eyes. Like this handsome and mighty candle creation, no matter how many times she looks at it, she will never get tired of it. Soon, as the deafening sound of blade collision gradually dissipated, the war of attrition between the candle soldier and the biscuit soldier finally came to an end. As a result, the helmets of the candle soldiers were shattered, their smooth and tidy bodies were covered with dense cuts, and many candle weapons in their hands were dilapidated, none of them intact. And the biscuit soldier's condition is equally miserable. The paralyzed biscuit face is riddled with holes, 3 of his 6 arms are broken, and the biscuit armor draped over his body has been deformed by hammering, and it is no longer a majestic and domineering image. This extremely tragic soldier-to-face battle ended in a nearly lose-lose outcome, with neither side benefiting from it. Having said that, the mood of the manipulators on the 2 sides is completely different. Mr. 3's face was expressionless, as if he was not surprised by this ending, but he couldn't help but be surprised. After the system was strengthened twice, the candle soldier created by his wax fruit ability was able to compete with the biscuit soldier of a strong man like Cracker. Compared to his surprise, Cracker looked frightened properly. As the core performance of the fruit ability, the biscuit soldier has always been a skill he is proud of, and it can play a vital role even in the face of opponents of the same level. I never imagined that in a place like this, I would be beaten with a broken candle to look like a ghost. Come again. Cracker's face was full of dissatisfaction, and with a small hand, several biscuits were created out of thin air, and a brand new cookie soldier was pieced together. Just when he was about to fight the second round of candle soldiers who had also recovered their original appearance, Brule, who was slender and thin, suddenly stood up behind him. Brother Cracker, as long as it is a candle, no matter how hard and firm it it will definitely not be able to avoid the characteristic of being afraid of fire. Hearing this, Cracker stared at the gray-white candle soldier, and his restless expression calmed down a little. Ha ha ha, how could I forget this? Thanks for your reminder, Bree. Yes, candles are afraid of fire. After mastering the weakness of Candle Soldier, Cracker controlled the Biscuit Soldier without hesitation, making it spin the great sword in his hand at high speed, and then stab directly on the biscuit shield. Zzz. The friction brought about by the high-speed rotation burst out the extreme high temperature, burning the whole sword red and sparks flying. Take it, you imposter. There was a confident look on Cracker's narrow face. The Biscuit Soldier holding a flaming sword followed suit and dashed towards the Candle Soldier created by Mr. 3. The Candle Soldier did not dodge or evade the same way as before, raising the round shield rung in front of him, fearlessly against the flaming sword. The moment it came into contact with the open flame, the huge round shield made of the candle ignited unexpectedly and spread to the whole body of the Candle Soldier at an extremely fast speed. With the thick gray-white smoke formed by the violent burning of the candle, the entire Candle Soldier was bathed in the blazing fire. The flaming wax liquid keeps dripping to the ground, forming a unique fire field, making the Candle Soldiers like flame giants from the passage of hell. Haha, just let me cut you tattered Candle Soldier into pieces just like cutting fruit. A surprise flashed in Cracker's eyes, and he manipulated the Biscuit Soldier holding a sharp and heavy six-handed sword to attack the Candle Soldier who kept dripping wax liquid. What he never expected was that in such a state of intense burning, Candle Soldier still had no intention of retreating. I saw weapons of different shapes and burning flames on its back, colliding directly with the Biscuit Soldiers. Bang 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 bang. The wax liquid covered the sparks and scattered, and the biscuit crumbs also shattered. The lit Candle Soldier, only the candle on the surface of the body was burned into a liquid state, and its inner core, the strength was not reduced at all. Moreover, the continuous burning and release of high-temperature candle weapons also baked the hard biscuits to be extremely brittle. Every time they collided, they would be cracked and cracked by the violent impact, and they would fall into pieces. The Candle Soldier and the Biscuit Soldier have evolved from the passionate scraping of the first meeting to the current, rapid wear and tear, into a rapid war of attrition visible to the naked eye. Even over time, Candle Soldiers with surface wax as a buffer deplete much more slowly than Biscuit Soldiers. Mr. 3 looked at the Biscuit Soldier who was gradually at a disadvantage, and held the goggles indifferently. His candle is indeed afraid of fire, but after several recent enhancements, both accuracy and strength have reached 100% of the upper limit of awakening. High-strength candles of this level cannot be defined by ordinary candles. Unless it is an instant detonation doped with microdynamite like a large flame of a candle, the normal flame roasting will not have a significant effect at all. But, this kid, Cracker, helped me develop a good move. Mr. 3 looked at the flaming Candle Soldier who was like a Vulcan descending, and scrubbed his chin beard with satisfaction. Although intense burning will speed up the attrition of Candle Soldiers, correspondingly, the flame will give Candle Soldiers higher and stronger damage. More importantly, this posture of standing in the ashes looks so handsome, right? Thinking of this, Mr. 3's heart was filled with heavy gratitude to the Cracker, which immediately overflowed and turned into gratitude from the bottom of his heart. Cracker, your ability to imitate me is the greatest affirmation to me. I understand it very well and will not mind. So next, take a good look at it and learn it well. This trick is called the Super Burst Flame Candle General. Cracker exploded in anger on the spot, turned back suddenly, and stared fiercely at Charlotte Brule. The fiery little eyes seemed to be roaring. Bree, bad idea from you bastard. Huh. Brule was frightened by the sudden change in the style of painting. After her eyeballs popped out of her sockets, she instantly fell on the ground and apologized repeatedly. I'm so sorry, Brother Cracker, I'm really sorry. Cracker gasped heavily. He was reluctant to blame Bree in public, looking into Mr. 3's eyes filled with anger. Damn it. If that's the case, then use the number to compete. He raised his arms and clapped frantically, and every time he clapped, a Biscuit Soldier was born out of thin air. In the blink of an eye, densely packed Biscuit Soldiers filled half of the reception hall. The terrifying sense of oppression instantly filled up. Mr. 3's response to this is quite simple and rude, that is. The small candle field unfolded, and the gray-white wax liquid surged from bottom to top, turning into huge Candle Soldiers. A large number of Candle Soldiers occupy the other half of the hall, competing with the army of Biscuit Soldiers on the opposite side. The battle between the two sides is just an order from those who are less capable. Just when everyone was holding their breath for the ensuing soldier melee, A strong male voice with absolute calmness rang out, crushing the extremely tense atmosphere of the scene. Cracker. What are you doing? In the calm and thick voice, there is a very obvious coldness. When everyone in the reception hall heard the news, they saw a big, muscular man with long legs walking slowly towards the gate made of red hormies. The man has short amaranth hair, stitched scars on his cheeks, a white scarf covering his mouth around his neck, and pink tattoos and skulls branded on his bare chest. He was wearing a pair of black gloves, a thorn on his left arm, black jeans, and black and white knee pads tied around his legs. A pair of black leather boots with spikes stepped on the ground, making a clanking sound, and the overall clothing shape was full of a strong black metal style. At the moment when this man exuding infinite charm appeared, the eyes of the audience were all attracted by him, and involuntarily fell on the domineering cheek. That's right, he is the second in command of the Big Mom Pirates in the true sense, the head of the 3 desert generals, and the highest combat power in Cake Island. Katakuri. Brother Katakuri. The appearance of Katakuri completely relaxed the suspending hearts of many ministers of the nations. If the existence of crackers makes them not afraid of the enemy, then the most perfect brother Katakuri brings absolute peace of mind and security. Katakuri. Crocodile took a heavy puff of his cigar and looked at Katakuri solemnly. Although he rarely dealt with the Big Mom Pirates, but in the past 2 years reading newspapers in the New World, he also deeply felt the terror and strength of the second in command of the 4 emperors. This is one of the few men who needs to raise all his spirits and take it seriously. Beside Crocodile, Mr. 3 withdrew the candle soldier in the small field, and his eyes fell on Katakuri. Completely different from the anime images watched across the screen, the sense of oppression brought about by the card that I saw with my own eyes is simply beyond imagination. Just looking at it with one eye can make the nerves of the whole body tense involuntarily. Under the gazes of countless eyes, Katakuri, dressed in black metal, walked forward like this, past Mr. 3 and the others, and came to the panic-stricken Kalija. Tell me about the cracker, what the hell is going on? Katakuri's eyes swept across the messy scene. Brother Katakuri, Mr. 3, this damn guy actually said I copied his ability. Cracker raised his hand and pointed at Mr. 3 on the opposite side, gnashing his teeth, obviously being very angry. No matter who it is, if a move that has been used for decades is inexplicably called plagiarism, there will be a fire. Moreover, taking advantage of this reason to take advantage of the situation, you can test the strength of the other party a little, and then provide a certain reference value for the next negotiation between the 2 parties. After all, he is a general who has followed Anti across the New World for many years. Cracker is not as pure and violent as it looks on the surface, but has certain insidiousness and tricks. Although not much. Katakuri's eyes turned and landed on Mr. 3, and then he retracted it, looking at the displeased Cracker and said softly. This sea has a wide variety of fruit abilities, and it is normal for similar situations to occur. We all see your strength in our eyes. We don't need to care about the words of others. We firmly believe that self is the most powerful proof. Katakuri, who saw that Cracker was trying for a tentative purpose, did not blame Cracker for being reckless. On the contrary, the gentle tone reflects the absolute affirmation of the younger brother as an older brother. I understand, brother Katakuri. Kalika nodded heavily, and his manic heart suddenly calmed down. The imposing biscuit soldiers behind them also vanished. Then, next. When Katakuri saw this, he turned around and focused all his attention on Mr. 3 and the others on the opposite side. The Buggy Pirates, or to be more precise, the members of the newly organized cross-trade union, what are you doing in Wangguo during this special period? It was a question with the same scrutiny, but from the stern expression of Katakuri, there was a world of difference from the cradle. This invisibly exuded aura is quite powerful. Even so, Mr. 3 was still calm and unmoved, holding up the goggles. When the main master appeared, they naturally couldn't do it as they said just now. I don't have any special thoughts. I just heard that there are countless treasures in the territory of the 4 emperors and Charlotte Lingling. Mr. 3's tone was calm, without too many mood swings. But in the ears of the cadres of the Big Mom Pirates on the opposite side, it is tantamount to the most arrogant provocation. If that's what you're here for, then all. Katakuri took a step forward, and just as he was about to further judge the hostility of the opponent, a red light flashed in the depths of his gloomy eyes. Then, he stopped the words he had not finished, and stood still with his arms crossed. Mr. 3's pupils shrank. Do you notice what I'm going to say next? To foresee the short future is really terrifying and domineering. Feeling troublesome, he sighed heavily, and still said the unfinished but fully foreseen words, of course, we are not very interested in this for the time being, At least we don't need to use force to plunder. Damn bastard Mr. 3, can you talk without panting so hard? While the ministers who were all ready for battle breathed a sigh of relief, they couldn't help but curse at Mr. 3 in their hearts. The current world is walking on thin ice, and it may collapse at any time and become a purgatory on Earth. Therefore, unless it is absolutely necessary, they do not want to fight with the deep-rooted crusaders. The so-called big gasp was actually deliberately done by Mr. 3. The purpose is to arouse the other party's tense nerves and play with their emotions through the huge psychological gap before and after, thereby affecting their original calm state and occupying the commanding heights of the negotiation. Of course, this killing operation must be based on Katakuri's stable and reliable character. He is not as popular as Cracker, and he is destined not to risk the fate of the entire family and start a war without a word just because of a single word. It's a pity that the perfect calculation doesn't seem to be of much benefit in front of Katakuri arrogance. Seeing Katakuri staring at him so quietly, in desperation, Mr. 3 had no choice but to give up psychological warfare and ask straight to the point. Katakuri, I don't need to say more about the situation in the world right now. You, who are in the center of the vortex, should know better than us. There are countless brutal bloodthirsty people staring here. You wouldn't want to see your lovely younger siblings being slaughtered, right? And our cross-trade union can help you solve these unnecessary troubles.